Hello and welcome to episode 6 of 2015, A Kerbal Odyssey. Today, Valentina is going on a dangerous mission all the way out to the moon. Now, we still have not upgraded our technology to be able to make any maneuver nodes or to set any targets. But what we do have here is a rocket that's just under 140 tons. We had to take some fuel out of these large solid rocket boosters to meet our weight. And now we're going to go to the moon, and instead of just doing a flyby, we are planning on orbiting and landing and gathering science from the moon and then bringing it all the way back to Earth. So, as we start our turn here, you'll notice that we are not turning a true 90 degrees east. We are trying to turn a little bit north so that we can catch the moon in its inclined orbit, and hopefully we can actually have an encounter. Another difference between this launch with our normal launches, we like to orbit around Earth, and maybe between 75 and 100 kilometers we'll circularize, and then we'll head out towards whatever target our target is. In this case, we are heading straight towards the moon. We will not be establishing any orbit at all. We are trusting that Valentina has done a good job, not in just how she flies the plane, but in how she plans the mission and plans the timing of the launch. So she's doing all of it, all on her own, and you gotta give her props for that. In the background here, you can see the Great Lakes. So that's kind of nice. You know that we are indeed on Earth. Okay, so now we are relying solely on what boosters we have left. Our apoapsis is 650, 700 kilometers, and we're rapidly rising that number. We need it to be at about 37,000 kilometers, give or take, and that's going to be when we cut our fuel and check our map, and hopefully things look like they're lining up. In several practice runs here, whoops, this is another strange bug that I've seen a few times where the camera just on its own zooms all the way out. And this is post-commentary. You will see that bug at least one more time. It happened many times for me, but a lot of those will not make the final video because it was just a little too much. So we overshot by a little bit, so we're just going to turn retrograde and thrust just a little bit, bring it back down to 37 kilometers. Didn't lose too much fuel there, but we did lose a little bit. So as you can see, we seem to be lined up pretty well, but we are going to be a little bit underneath the moon. But the question is, will we be able to actually enter its sphere of influence? And Val had asked us to upgrade the facilities, but we were too busy playing Candy Crush, and obviously we didn't do that. So instead of trying to make any changes, we are just going to head on all the way out and trust that we will indeed enter its sphere of influence and be in a somewhat polar orbit. And as you can see, there we go, our sphere of influence changes. And now all we need to do is to burn retrograde and capture our orbit around the moon. So we're going to do a little more time acceleration to get up to the moon's periapsis and then go for it. In the meantime, somewhere else on Earth, something is happening that no one else knows about. Ben Kerman is launching, or will shortly be launching, from a secret Russian base, one that the Kerbal Society has no idea exists, not yet at this point. Of course, a few questions arise. How did Ben Kerman end up in Russia? And how does he have rocket technology all to his own. And what is his purpose? What is he trying to accomplish in secret? Meanwhile, Valentina is going to burn retrograde and set up our approach to the surface of the moon. Unlike the moon orbiting Kerbal, this moon, this has a much rockier surface. Much rockier. A lot more craters you'll see. And it really is a beautiful sight. So, we're going to call the vessel the Rocky Balboa. And going with the Rocky theme. I don't know how much more of that we will do, but for now, we're going to do that. So, some things we've brought along is the Kerbal inventory system and a wrench. We aren't going to be using it, but in this Kerbal inventory system mod, you can bring the book along, and there are some instructions in how you use it. So you could bring, I believe, 8 items in the command module, and then you can bring the big box, which holds a lot more storage, and it shows you how to attach it, how to use it, how to put items in it, pull items from it, the kinds of things you can use, batteries, solar panels, struts, of course. So there's just a little brief preview of that. Okay, so now that we've taken a mystery goo and a temperature, Valentina is going to EVA out and collect that science and bring it back in the command module. So, first she wants to do an EVA report, and I don't blame her, that is a very good idea. And just do a little EVAing. Of course, lights. We haven't unlocked real lights yet, but we do still have the lights on the helmet. And those lights are better than no lights, that's for sure. So, one thing I will say is, when I record these videos, for some reason my mouse control is really bad, very lately. And it wasn't always this way, and it is now, and I'm not quite sure why. So a lot of times it looks like I'm not really doing anything when I'm actually trying to move the mouse around. But we have to just deal with it, so Valentina's done a pretty good job collecting that data. And so now we are ready to get a lot closer to the moon. We're going to time accelerate just a little bit here and get ready for our approach. And our approach is going to be one of the most beautiful things you will see in this game. It doesn't look too great from up here, but once we zoom in and look down, yeah, look at the surface of the moon there. It's a much rougher terrain than what we are used to. So how to pick a good landing site? Well, typically you want flat ground, but as you can see, there's not a whole lot of flat ground, and maybe a little bit in between the craters here. So, as you can also see, if you look at the biome we are in, it can change quite often. It's in the highlands now. Excuse me. It's in the highlands now, but it transitions to the lunar seas back and forth, and the midlands. I think it's all based on the height of the craters, but I'm not quite certain. And obviously, if you look at Valentina's face, she is absolutely loving it. A little sad that Jebediah is no longer among the living, because Jeb would have loved this place. And she'll keep that in mind as she approaches the surface and lands. Oh, look at that huge crater. I wonder what kind of impact that was and what it must have looked like. Okay, so after enough sightseeing, Valentina decides to choose a landing spot. She's aiming for the ridge of this crater, and it looks like Valentina made a tiny mistake, burned a little bit too much. So she's going to aim a little radial here, towards radial, and give it a little boost in height and let the momentum carry it, that horizontal velocity. Not too fast, about 25 meters per second, but that's enough. And now we can kill it and drop down. So, she planned this trip very, very well. You can see we only have this little bit of landing gear, and we have just enough fuel to make it and to land on it. And it's a little more steep than we thought it would be. So, Valentina, she's going to have to make a judgment call. Does she think she can get out, or does she think it'll tip over? With a wider base, it might not tip over. The best way, if you're ever in this type of position, I mean, you could try to aim for a higher, flatter part of the hill, or what you can do is just turn off your SAS and see what happens. If it starts to tip, turn it back on and find a better place to land. But just checking what little fuel we have left, Valentina turns off the SAS and sees that the ship will not fall over, and so she turns it right back on. So it's safe to exit. So now we can gather our data, our other mystery goo. We can check our temperature. We can check our Science Junior, and I believe that is all we can do for science other than our crew reports and EVA reports. We have not unlocked the technology to get a surface sample just yet. So we will have to take more trips to the moon and gather all the surface samples we can in order to collect that science. Now, as you see, as we're collecting the science, the vessel is sliding around a little bit. So Valentina is a little concerned about that, but she still needs to gather her EVA and plant her flag. And this flag is planted in honor of Jebediah Kerman. Jebediah was once quoted as saying, "If I don't make it back, know that I died at home," to signify that the surface of these extraterrestrial bodies was indeed what he considered home, and how fitting as his ashes will one day be spread on the moon. So, once Valentina has collected all the science, she gets back in the Rocky Balboa, and now she is looking to return safely to Earth. So, I'm going to do a little time acceleration just to see if there's a better time to launch, and nothing obvious comes up. So, whoops, a little clipping there, but then Valentina immediately takes off, and then you can see the beautiful terrain below her again, and she's got the biggest smile on her face. She is so excited. So, we are out of fuel with these 4 landing gear tanks, whatever you want to call them, but we have plenty to get back. And we burn and burn and burn, and it really doesn't take that much fuel to get back to Earth. It takes a lot to get from the thick atmosphere of Earth all the way out to the moon and establish an orbit and land, and then you basically only have to worry about breaking orbit in the moon, which is a lot easier. There's no atmosphere to fight, the gravity's a lot lower, and once you do, it just takes a little bit extra fuel to establish your periapsis at the correct altitude. And we are going to try, unfortunately we can't see what it is at now because we don't have an upgraded tracking station, so we're going to have to actually leave the moon's sphere of influence first. But we have plenty of fuel left, and with that fuel we will be able to set our periapsis. We're going to set it for around 30 kilometers, and at that point we should be able to aerobrake and descend safely on our parachute. Val, looking out the window, wants to take one quick look at home, and she spots something interesting in a polar ice cap. Perhaps she will be flying to a pole in a plane soon. But first, we're going to zoom out accidentally because the game has been doing that for unknown reasons. In the meantime, before we get too far away from the moon, Valentina is going to be collecting science that she had not grabbed yet. She wanted to get off the surface of the moon as soon as possible, and it's always better to grab the science while on your way back or in orbit in a stable environment. It wasn't really that stable on the moon. You could see the ship sliding and then starting to clip through the ground. But we can collect Mystery Goo, we can collect Science Junior, and we can bring back a lot of science. And Valentina's already getting excited, thinking about what's going to be unlocked next. Will we finally get solar power to keep our batteries recharged? What about RCS thrusters? Maybe some bigger rockets. It's kind of difficult, even with the lights on. She can't really see. So this was a strange event. Somehow, while playing the game, it just took me right back to the Space Center for completely unknown reasons, and I had to go back to the ship. And thankfully Valentina hadn't drifted too far away yet. So we are going to take the data, and that should be the last of it. I think we got the temperature data. So we're going to store it and maybe take one last crew report. Oh, we already have a crew report. So what we need to do is exit, grab all the data including the crew report, put it back in a separate location in the command module, and now we can do one more crew report without overriding the one we already had. That'll give us a little bit extra science. So now we can accelerate time and head out of the moon's sphere of influence, and we can head back towards Earth. First, let's set our periapsis. Right now it's at 4.6 thousand kilometers, and we really want that to be at about 30 kilometers. So just burn retrograde. It doesn't take a whole lot of fuel when you're this far out. The closer you get, burning retrograde, it won't help as much as burning anti-radial, radial or anti-radial. I think it's anti-radial. But you can always just aim, and if it's the wrong one, aim the other direction. Okay, so we're at 29 kilometers, and in the meantime, we are going to see the launch that Ben Kerman has. But that will be in episode 7 of 2015, A Kerbal Odyssey. Until then, I'm Ben Markos. You stay classy.